The name of the session is What is the Role of Technology when it comes to DEI in the Post-Pandemic World? I am Ceipal's Director of Marketing Communications, and I'm just here to host and moderate that discussion. And with us are panelists, and I'm not sure if you're all seeing it in the same order that I'm seeing it, but I'm going to assume that you are. And to my right on the screen, at least, we have Erica Cornier, who is the Vice President of Government and Corporate Relations for Indotronics and the Vani Group. And before joining Indotronics, Erica served as Vice President of Strategic Planning and Business Development at the New York and New Jersey Minority Supplier Development Council. And in this role, she focused on developing the strategic direction of the council. She led efforts in securing additional sources of funding from government agencies and corporations and built alliances that expanded programming as well. She holds her bachelor's in management information systems and a master's in environmental health and safety from the Rochester Institute of Technology. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We also have just below me is Ganesh Iyer, founder and CEO of .in.us. And I hope I'm saying it the way you would, Ganesh.
Yes.
He is a curious entrepreneur by nature with immense experience in product management, marketing, and sales operations from Cisco, AMD, Six Sigma startup, and IIT Mumbai as well. He has his double master's in engineering and an MBA from Stanford University as well. And he loves to doodle. Maybe we'll get a chance to see some of those doodles. And he is a very proud father as well as I am. So welcome, Ganesh.
Thank you.
And I know Samir, who is also a proud father, is also the proud founder and CEO of Ceipal Corporation. You may have seen him in the opening remarks if you were here that early with us. He's a serial entrepreneur who's dedicated to advising and investing in technology startups, specifically in the HR and AI space. In the past 10 years, Samir has founded and acquired over 6 companies, including a staffing firm, multiple SaaS platforms, and a digital marketing agency, serving thousands of customers around the world. His key interests include talent acquisition, talent engagement, total talent management, as a regular contributor of thought leadership pieces to HR publications, including Forbes, where he's a member of the HR Council. He was recently inducted to. He's very prolific, and to date, he's received a number of awards and recognitions, including accolades from Inc. 500, 5000, Rochester's Top 100, Deloitte's Fast 500, Forbes Best Startup Employers. This list is quite extensive, so I'm just going to say that, Samir, I don't know what you do in your spare time, but I'm not sure that you have any based on this. Welcome, Samir, and thank you for joining the panel and for hosting this day of learning and networking and exchanging. I'm really honored to be here. So watching the opening keynote, I was inspired by Don's words about being comfortable and being uncomfortable, because the elephant in the room is that here I am, and I've been doing this a lot lately. Samir has really brought me out of my shell on this. The middle-aged white guy talking about diversity and DEI. But it's an important conversation no matter what demographic you come from, I think. So I'm really excited to work on this. So when my background as a marketer and as a PR flack also includes stints in journalism. So I'm a storyteller first. And so when Samir talked to me about how technology could play such a key role in DEI and how artificial intelligence could solve some of these challenges and take all the emotion out of it and all the feelings that we all might have out of it and just solve the problem. Like from an engineering perspective, I can't help but drink our own Kool-Aid when I hear about that. It gets you really excited to hear about, and I think any journalist worth his or her salt would be interested in a story like that and salivate over it. So I just wanted to start by saying, I know I've gone on a little long on this introduction, but with everything that's happened in the last year, with the pandemic really changing the world for the staffing industry in particular, I mean, every facet of society, but for staffing, we talk about how it's changed for driving a remote workforce, creating a global workforce, healthcare concerns, and what that means inside a workforce. Do we return to the office? Don't we? There's the Great Resignation. There are all these stories around it. But diversity is a story that refuses to quit in the face of that. It still seems to, dominate headlines and drive businesses. Why does I want to start before we get and dive in deep to the technology stuff? I wanted to start with you, Erica, because you have so much experience here in the diversity realm and credibility, of course. Why does DEI even matter? Does it matter still in this post-pandemic era?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Well, I think it does. And, like you said, it's not something new. It's not a new buzzword or anything like that. I think as businesses get more competitive, stakeholders, they're paying attention to other areas. So, for instance, they say the devil is in the details. So now we're hearing about environmental impacts, environmental metrics. We're hearing about where funds are being donated, donations. And so now we as stakeholders are interested now in the makeup of a company's employee base. Is it inclusive? Can somebody like me, who's a Latina female, be able to thrive at employee XYZ? And so when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's because it really does matter. It's not only the right thing to do, but, it can also impact your bottom line. It'll impact a company's brand. It can lead to attracting the top talent. And as you know, hiring the right employee can lead to lower turnover and greatly reduce costs. And so does it matter? I'd say yes, it absolutely does.
So if it matters, I want to turn to you, Samir, as the leader of a company that provides solutions to staffing companies and technology. Like, where do we even start to address the issue of diversity? If creating a diverse workforce is a priority, and if it's a strategic business advantage, what's the first step?
Yeah, Scott, if you allow me, I just want to make one correction. The DEI is for everyone. We see large into the corporations. MSP is tracking the staffing firms, the diverse workforce contributions. There are everywhere, right? I think we see much more because corporates they drive the business, they dictate the business, so we see much more noise around. But really, underlying corporates have a full-time, which is the FTE workforce, and they have a contingent workforce that is coming from the supplier, workforce. So they're looking for. In the past, people used to talk about, okay, if you're a diverse supplier, and all the spend on you would be, our diversity spend. Now they're looking into, no, that's not the case. Like, let's look into a per placement, per candidate getting into the system. Are these a diverse workforce, and are we have enough data to measure that our spend is really directly going towards the a diverse workforce. So that's the key. But again, the biggest thing is, do we have enough data to measure? Like, where do we stand today? Like, we kind of basis for our existing workforce data. Second is, how do we, once we know the data, how do we plan for that? And the third is going to, how do we implement it, right? Okay, we all know that we have to improve our workforce diversity, but how do we do that technologically, right? So we have steps that, okay, you measure your first where you stand, and then you meaningfully set some goals, corporate goals. And then third is, how do you go and implement those three things? We've kind of laid out completely clearly of all the three steps and how we do it in our Ceipal website. So I don't want to get into too specifics, but I think that's how we want to address these problems.
So Samir, you and I had a conversation offline just yesterday in person about this, and I'm wondering how important or is it not as important? We talked about MSPs and corporate needs for DEI programs and efforts. So at what point do staffing professionals need to worry about aligning with those? Are we there yet, or is that something that's coming, do you feel?
We're already here. Again, I'm saying, we're seeing about 30% an average, some are less, some are more, it depends on the industry, that the workforce, percentage of the workforce are anywhere from 20 to 30% of that are contingent workforce, right? And then if you don't address the contingent workforce problem in terms of the diversity, then you're actually not doing that 20 to 30% of the workforce. So So it is there, and it is important both sides, the full-time and the contingent workforce. So the full-time, you have internal, hiring teams that controls, or maybe executive search firms. You can specifically say, we hear some of the very publicly listed large corporations stating their DI goals, saying that, okay, we want to improve our women manager workforce for a specific engineering division by 10 percentage points in next 3 years. So that's a very specific goal. We're talking about I don't want to mention the name, but I mean, if you actually, most of right now it's about 65%, 2/3 of the companies publicly stating their DI goals in their websites, right? If you go pick up any one, and just Google it to 2021 DI initiatives for pick any company name, you most likely will find there in their website. And how are they doing it? They know that okay, you can go by and saying I want to improve 20% of our workforce to women, improve women workforce by 20% in next 1 year. That's unrealistic and can do it entire organization. So what we're telling them is just be realistic. Pick the goals that you want to really achieve. So you see some of these publicly stated public companies specifically talks about, we want to improve our women management workforce from 18% to 25% in next 3 years. Very realistic goal. You know where you want to do it. And then when you go in, that's where you look into how are we bringing these women manager workforce into our organization through promotions, through internal hires, through bringing through contractors, turning into managers, right? So you need to look into all the sources, and then you have to really refine, and then you have to make a very specific goals to achieve every month, every year, every quarter. I mean, this is something that you don't have like a magic bullet, right? You have to have a very strategically drive the initiative and pick the goals that you can achieve, make it very realistic, and take it from there.
Ganesh, I want to get you involved in this conversation because I know you're knee deep in some of the technological aspects of figuring out how to contend with this, how to meet the challenge that so many organizations of all sizes, maybe particularly bigger ones, and it's spreading rapidly, to meet DEI goals. So one thing that I was curious about, we talk about putting the human back into human resources. We heard that in our opening segment of Ceipal Connect today. And so many headlines today in HR technology revolve around AI, which, so many solutions say, well, we're AI driven. So including our own here at Ceipal. So if so many of the headlines say that, well, we're concerned, on one hand, we say that bias can be eliminated through AI. And on the other hand, we read stories that say, well, AI can also be further entrenched into the process if we're not careful about it. So how do we safeguard against human or even unconscious bias, or conscious for that matter, entering into the equation when we're dealing with algorithms and machine learning, for example?
And that's a great question, and I think it's hard to always put the human-centric approach when you're building an algorithm, because it's always built by a human, where we always think about the worst scenarios, bake it as a part of the algorithm development. But end of the day, some corner cases hit hard, and you have to be conscious of how you are building those algorithms, and more importantly, educating the end users how to use this to benefit the end goal that the enterprise is achieving. So end of the day, it always starts with the baseline, right? Where do we stand? Forget about the algorithm, how it is done in the current industry, right? It's very chaotic. There is no set rules in place. Everyone uses their own gut feel in terms of making the decisions. And even if you try to do some surveys and try to collect some of the analysis to see where do you stand in terms of seeing your organization from the diversity and equity, the response is generally 20 to 30%, which means that you're making a decision on a subset of data compared to the entire organization, right? So the key part for us is how do we move that needle? And as long as we are moving it in a positive direction, knowing that it's always going to be a probabilistic tool, and always knowing that you are taking it at a level where it is not specific to a person, but more at an organizational level, I think you will be able to reduce the bias. That's what the approach has been through Ceipal, is how do you take this at an organizational level, not at a personal level, so that you remove any personal identifiable information, but get enough information with larger data set to make informed decisions.
That's interesting. And I think, so we're giving our attendees, for those that aren't in the know, which are most of the folks in attendance, I'm sure, we're giving a sort of a sneak peek of some of the technology that you will be seeing from Ceipal soon. And there will be other sessions where we will dive into some of that, where we're actively using AI to figure out how we address this and how we help our customers address the DEI challenge, and how that can make you a more appealing organization to organizations that are seeking your services out. And Erica, for you, I wanted to know, what are your thoughts coming from your background of dealing with DEI requirements, EEO requirements, getting MBE certifications, for example, among a myriad of other things that you've done on your resume. What is technology's role? Why should we use technology when assessing DEI?
That's a great question. You've touched on it, and so did Ganesh. So it's about collecting data that's data-driven. So you don't have to worry about this unconscious or implicit bias. As humans, certain scenarios can bring out an unconscious attitude or belief in us. And this can be detrimental when you're selecting the right talent. So for instance, biases can be more prevalent when you're multitasking or when you're working under a tight deadline and, things get crazy. And so using this AI-driven platform can help then eliminate those biases.
Has this been, in your experience, Erica, has this been a cumbersome process for organizations? Is this something that has been very manual in your experiences in the past? I'm sure you've done diversity audits or things along those lines where you would be able to relate to some of the challenges that organizations face in meeting reporting requirements, for example. How difficult a process can that be?
It can be very difficult. You have large data sets. How do you sort it? Who does it? What are you looking for? Did you collect the right data? And so all of that can be cumbersome. It's time, energy, and a lot for a company to go through.
And when we talk about collecting that data, and before we go on, I do want to remind folks that if you click over to the right side, you can enter a question in our Q&A session. And I know some of you have, so I just want to encourage folks to continue doing that. And we will be getting to the Q&A section in a short while. But as Erica just spoke about, and Ganesh touched upon as well, Erica spoke about collecting vast amounts of data, and Ganesh, you talked about the idea that, well, maybe some of this data is sensitive. So, and so we do it in aggregate. And Samir, how important is it that we address that? Are there a lot of landmines that we have to be mindful of when we're doing assessments?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In fact, that's the question that everybody should be asking. Especially when we use the technology, we don't go specific individual information. It's an aggregate data. And Ganesh and I've discussed it back and forth on this when we building this algorithm. I don't know how many times, Ganesh. So we look into it, what's the key interest here? The key interest is to give the enough data and insights to the companies and corporations to see the direction, right? Let's say, for an example, let's say we have 10,000 workforce, and we have we have 4 diversity areas, right? Like whites, African Americans, Asians, and Hispanic, Latino, right? Let's just say. So let's say one of these groups have less than 5% participation. So we need, that's the data that's very helpful, because let's say in a Hispanic, Latino, we have let's 2%. I'm just throwing some numbers, right? Just 2% population of entire 10,000 employees. So that's something that we want to take a look into, like 200 employees of Hispanic, Latino out of 10,000 employees. That's a problem, right? Can we do better? So you want to know that information. Then you have to Okay, then you could go back and say, okay, do we have any managers in probably have zero participation from that group. So that's where you want to say, you know what, I want to improve 10 percentage points women, Hispanic, Latino managers into our organization. You're making it very specific, right? To come to that stage, you needed to know where do we stand today, right? The assessment helps the organization to find out, where do we stand today, and it helps them to take that one specific direction that it's more measurable and achievable, and take the steps towards meeting those goals. It's not about individuals, it's not about one person. So that's why we publish the results and publish these participation of a specific ethnic groups or gender groups at a very aggregate level. So you will not be able to find an individual level.
One of the interesting things, Samir, about the technology and the demonstrations that you've shared here internally is that we can even dig a little further down and see, how we're doing in terms of equity as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of information you can actually find. Or let's say, if, we're asking for an employee first name, last name, and just the location of the country. That would give them their gender, their ethnic information, and gender. Within genders, how the ethnicity distribution, like male distribution, how the male distribution looks like by ethnic, and the same thing with the female distribution. How they're distributed, females, how the females distributed by ethnic group wise. But beyond that, right, if we have, let's say, their wage information, right? Let's say if we have employee first name, last name, the wage, then you can start looking into it. How are the employees are working? Is an equitable distribution the wage wage distribution among men and women? Then you can also look into how the wage distribution among various ethnic groups. And then if you have like a title, right, it's employee titles, then you can look into it. Let's say, for an example, if we pick top 5, just very broad areas, right? Analyst, managers, director, VP, and executive teams, like C-level executive teams, right? So if you take those are 5 broad categories, I'm saying you can take 20 categories. Then you would look into it, like how are the men versus women are doing, and how are the various ethnic groups are doing by these specific category level. Then you are looking into very specific. That's what I was talking about. One of the largest aerospace defense company in their 2021 diversity goals, they're talking about we want to improve our women workforce managers, improve from 18% to 25% in next 3 years. How we were able to arrive those numbers, very specific numbers. And now we know that women employees by a specific job level, that would gives you an equity distribution. How equitable are the gender distribution looks like? Are we pretty equitable, not only at the analyst role, but also at the manager level, at the VP level, at the director level? Then this will help the companies to identify where they want to make an improvement and make the specific, set the specific direction, and then make the efforts towards doing that. With Ceipal also has a solution to helps them. How do you collect all the sources of data that's coming in, all kinds of prospective employee data? Then if you don't have enough mix of candidates coming in with a specific title or the name, it actually kind of gives you, okay, when you're looking for any women managers in your existing pool, you probably don't have anything. There's no way you're going to achieve it. So then the companies can go back and say, maybe, they have very specific women workforce groups, right? You go reach out, hey, we're looking to improve our women manager workforce in our engineering division. Let us know if you have anybody, your friends, family members, and others that you can refer to us. So now you're actually making a specific effort, going to a specific you focus groups within the organization or outside, and trying to bring that workforce into the organization. You don't have the data, and unless you have the data, you can't be able to do that. So the kind of data and insights we provide through the platform, you could do a lot of things, but very at aggregate level.
Interesting. And on that topic, so I don't want to jump ahead to the Q&A, but I did notice that one of our attendees on the session, Kevin, has asked, how we feel or how the panel feels about LinkedIn's move to anonymize profiles. Do you feel this will have a significant impact in diversity hiring? And perhaps some of the panelists have heard of this. I want to encourage Kevin, if you have a link to a story to post on that in the Q&A, I would love to see it. But my gut tells me that your question relates to whether or not we'll be able to meet diversity requirements if profiles are anonymous, but I'm not sure. I think, Samir, you have told me a little bit about the databases that are publicly available, but there is a little bit of information we need to know about a workforce in order to make those determinations, correct, in terms of the aggregate measure of a workforce?
Yeah, I know. It doesn't matter what LinkedIn provides as long as we know their first name, last name, because the way, Ganesh can talk a little more specific in the technology perspective, probably, not the right time, but, I will have him to speak about it. But I think the way we do the algorithms was trained at a different, the names, the first name, last name. So it looks into origins of their first names, origins of the last names, and there are a lot of other data points that's out there. That's the data sources that algorithms got trained, irrespective of, as long as we know the first name, the last name is all what we needed. But Ganesh wants to say a few additional points on this.
Sure, absolutely. So specific to that question, as Samir said, and just building on his comment, right? To me, it is my perspective as LinkedIn is putting that in place so that they can give one more option to the end users if they want to anonymize the data. So it's going to be a toggle switch between, hey, do I basically turn that on as an admin so that all the recruiters will only see anonymized data, or should I just keep it on where you see the first name, last name, and you can also see the image of that person so that you can make a determination what gender or ethnicity this person is, and you can basically bring that person through the interview process. So they're just adding one more option to anonymize the data. But to me, if you can also give one more option to be more specific in terms of giving a probabilistic prediction, that would help in terms of meeting some of the DEI goals. So if you take this option of anonymizing, probably we wouldn't be able to meet any of the diversity goals if there are very specific ones. So that would just increase the time to hire somebody. It would increase the time to make a decision, but that may be very useful in corner cases where you absolutely need to anonymize to remove any bias because of some inherent data that you may have seen. So just an option. I think it's a good move. Options are always good depending on the scenarios that you are in. And to build on what Samir said, we make sure, again, the aspect of it's still a probabilistic tool. Whenever you're using any algorithms, it's still a probabilistic. It cannot be deterministic, but it gives you enough information to make informed decisions quickly.
That's helpful. Thank you, Ganesh. And Kevin, you have your answer. And Ganesh, I'd noticed you smiling when Samir was talking about all the many conversations that you two have shared. So I'm sure that that privacy concerns and concerns about how intrusive such technology could be is at top of mind. So it seems like in terms of the engineering, a lot has been put into this and thought out to ensure that it is an aggregate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to the privacy, right, I think this is a misnomer, and it's the aspect of the media playing it on the fear of anything so that they get the sound bites, right? End of the day, all these compliance rules force all the social network to comply to local laws. So as an example, when GDPR came into play or CCPA came into play, all these social sites like LinkedIn, Facebook have to turn off your data that can be searchable on Google. So unless until you consciously go and turn it on, it's pretty much turned off. So users don't have to worry about their data being there unless until they make a conscious decision to go out and make it public.
Thanks, Ganesh. Before we get to our Q&A, Erica, I wanted to ask you and I had a conversation earlier this week. There is a quote that's gone around various circles around diversity, being that diversity is is being asked to the dance or invited to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance, and some have said, well, that's not quite right. But we haven't really talked about inclusion, and you had some words of wisdom on that I thought were relevant to the topic of inclusion when we had that talk.
Yeah, so I came across this quote, diversity is a reality and inclusion is a choice. And so when we have a report that then will outline our current condition, we know now, we have it on hand, we know. I guess it's up to you then to decide, how do you proceed? So that data then can provide actionable insights, because that's really what it's about. You have your data, now you have to do something with it, right? To help you strategize then to reduce any gender, ethnic gaps within your workforce. But when I came across that, I thought it was fantastic, especially now more than ever. Diversity is a reality and inclusion is a choice.
I love that. Question that we'll go to the whole panel on, but Erica, I'm going to start with you. What impact, if any, do you think the pandemic has had on DEI? It's kind of back where we started. Spring asks us that.
Yeah, so I think diversity has always been at the forefront. I think, the pandemic everything just paused a little bit, but it was always there. And especially given what was going on in the world and everything that we saw in the news, it was there, and it was constantly being there, whether we're using diverse suppliers, whether we're hiring diverse folks to work with us. So I think it's always been there. And I think we've come out, we're here at this point, and we're looking at now, where are we? And so, we have this flashlight on everything and saying, what are we doing? What are we going to do? Where are we? What's our current condition? And I think that's where we're at, where everybody's doing a self-analysis, if you will.
It seems like we had a lot of time to think during quarantines, which are, ongoing, depending where you're at. Samir, do you have thoughts on that? How important, Shristi asks, is diversity to you individually as an industry leader?
I think it's very, very important, and it is a conscious decision to make a very concerted effort to bring the diversity into the workforce, and we do it. In the end of the day, look, I think we don't want to be like as a sound blasters here, but at the end of the day, the first one is you need to find the qualified team, right? Qualified comes first, diversity comes second, right? You agree with that, right? Because unless you have a qualified candidate team, if you have qualified candidates available, but also candidate is a diverse candidate, that's a key, because somebody has to come in. You're hiring someone to get the job done. If they can't have skills, don't have skills enough to do the job, then diversity is just becomes a buzzword, because you can't able to get the work done. But then how do we do both, right? Now, with this pandemic and the post-pandemic, and finding the right talent is becoming extremely difficult. And on top of that, now bringing the diverse workforce, just adding another layer of it, right? Unless we have the tools, processes, and the technology behind doing that, we're not able to achieve the goals. So that's why it's important to make this effort consciously and also realistically, right? You set the goals realistic, right? You're not saying, I'm going to change my workforce 50% men, 50% female workforce in next 18 months. That's not realistic. People don't assume that you can just change your entire workforce in 18 months, 2 years. One, right? Make it very realistic goals, and also make an effort to do that. It is, say, okay, I'm here. I'm looking for hiring more women workforce into our group. I'm waiting for candidates to come in. You probably don't get it, right? Then what efforts are you making to just do that? Do you have tools that helps you, technology platforms that helps you to curate the more qualified women candidates into our workforce? Do you have your HR policies that helping you to outreach some of those women-focused groups out there? Just he wants to build this, right? And because, as I'm saying, you need to balance both diversity plus the skilled workforce. So it's something that you have to make an effort. We do that all the time, and we are consciously making an effort. Are we absolutely perfectly balanced and diverse workforce? No, nobody has it. But I think realistically, we have to set our goals. We have to continue to push ourselves to meet those goals.
Interesting. And Ganesh has turned my attention to you, because I'm thinking as Samir's talking about the fact that really it becomes just a buzzword or a theme if we're not finding qualified candidates. So I'm curious, and that you've been so involved in working on this kind of technology. Were you surprised, or did you find what you expected in terms of when you were able to apply this technology, the amount of qualified candidates? Because I guess what I'm really wondering is, people sort of have this idea that, well, we just can't find them. They're not out there. If we're looking really hard and using technological tools, are the diverse candidates available? Is it the talent source? I mean, where are you finding the truth to be?
And that's where I think the technologies come in very handy, right? It's always easy to just look out for, as a human, it's always easy, unless until you're not trained in that profession for a longer time, you may not know what are the other nuances you can consider to find similar kind of talent, right? And that's where the technology can come and play, where it can not only find that specific talent attribute within a resume, as an example, or it can go a step further in finding adjacent technologies that may help in augmenting that talent to do the same role, right? And that's where the aspect of bringing out the diverse candidates through this technology, which can look for augmented maybe skill sets that the talent may have, surfaces more of diverse candidates. It can be gender, it can be ethnic background, and that helps to fulfill the pool that can also drive some of the activities in the DEI initiative. So definitely, I think the algorithms really help in accelerating, bringing out the talent, which probably is not having the same tag words used by what the recruiters may look out for. And that's where the technology can come in very handy in bringing the strengths versus hiding them. And also, to add to the question, right, the question on the impact of pandemic on DEI. DEI actually surfaced more on the aspect of why people are paying attention. Personally, in my opinion, is because of George Floyd. That really brought the attention front and center. People have been talking about this for decades, but this really brought it to prime stage, right? And as that was happening, the businesses have seen significant drop in revenue because of diverse candidates dropping off the workforce, primarily because of this virtual environment. People are not able to work from home. Their infrastructure may not be that good. Single moms who have to take care of the kids who are now taking their school from home. Everyone is changing their perspective of work, and that is directly impacting them either stepping down or stepping down from their existing roles. And that is causing a big issue in terms of the top line for any business, especially diverse candidates, right? And that's one of the reasons why such technologies are becoming more important now than any time else, because these can really help to bridge that gap, especially when you're working virtually.
So interesting and so true, Ganesh, that regardless of what anyone's opinion is of any of the stories that surface to the top, whether it's George Floyd or other instances like that, it's certainly shining a spotlight on the issues that surround that. And I want to ask you, Erica, from one of our attendees, what would you say would be the most difficult part, because you've been working in these programs for so long, about implementing any kind of DEI initiative or program?
I think there can be a lot, but I think one of them is looking at where you are right now and doing a good assessment of your data, a real truth assessment, and look at where you are. My background is mostly looking at suppliers. So looking at what does your supplier base look like? Are they diverse? Now you're looking at your employees. Are they diverse? So I think collecting all of that and really having a good baseline and being able then to, create a plan to then strategize to then implement it. But I really think it starts with your data. It starts with looking at where you at. To get a really good approach is to analyzing all of it and then moving forward.
Appropriately enough, as we sort of close out on our last 5 minutes of the session, our last question is for you, Samira. And interestingly enough, it's one that I never thought to ask you. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. But what has influenced your thinking around D&I or DEI, and what's motivated you to get involved and to apply technology here?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, right? I'm myself an immigrant, I'm myself a minority, and I know how important it is to bringing the right talented workforce, right talented people to the workforce, and it impacts to the organizations. Just personal experience, and I've seen around, and it is because you look into just Google it, right? Why do we need diverse workforce? You have tons of research reports from major research houses to individual research reports from the university schools. That all talks about diversity brings more innovation. Diversity brings the wider acceptance of their products and services into the market. Because, for an example, let's say if you're a company that's designing consumer goods, and if it's designed by one ethnic group for all of them, do you think that's going to serve the needs of everybody else? Because unless you have the diversity group, they bring in these ideas, they bring in their ethnic backgrounds and the flavors and the nuances into it. That's how you would build a product that appeals to everyone, but not just the one ethnic group. Just at such a micro level, right? And this is something, the same thing with you build, technologies, you build products, you build consumers, you build cars, anything related to that. I mean, just any product. I think having that, the right mix of diverse workforce brings higher productivity, more innovation into it. In fact, time after the time, these reports talks about as, companies have a good mix of diverse workforce, are very, higher profitable, have higher motivation. In fact, one quick thing is, we're seeing it's 60% of our workforce is currently by the millennial, and we're getting another 20% to Generation G. And these workforce really looking for companies who embrace the diversity in their workforce. And if you are being a diverse firm and you talk about it, you implement, you take things very seriously, you're more likely that you find, the most talented talent. For that means that helps you to innovate. If you're less diverse, they're very highly likely that you're not able to attract the most talented workforce to your organization. Just the bare minimum. I mean, it's very important for someone to come and work for you, that they want to see if you really embrace the diversity in the workforce. It's very, very important. One thing I would just want to talk about what Ganesh was talking about too. I want to bring this, right. I mean, we have this. I was talking in my keynote, before the keynote address, opening remarks. I can't find the talent workforce. Where do I find it, right? So I want to give just like a food for thought for everyone. It's like, we all look for, when we want to hire someone, we look for sources of an internal database, or we have these public job portals that we want to go search and find. But hey, think about what about having workforce that are looking for jobs, like a passive candidates, right? We call it passive candidate. So how do you look for, if you have a right job, great benefits, great things, that then you may attract the other 80% of the workforce that are actually not looking for jobs. So don't forget to look into the ways to curate the passive candidates that are out there. 80% of them, larger portion, looking, are most qualified of your looking workforce, that you should really look into it, right? So check out the passive candidate sourcing in the Ceipal platform. Again, Ganesh and team with the Ceipal collaboration, it was built an amazing ways to reach out to those passive candidates.
That's some great advice, Samir. Appreciate that, and appreciate your perspective on all of this. I think, we've had a conversation ongoing about diversity and why it's important for Business Edge, and now we can talk about implementation and technology, and there will be sessions throughout the day involving that topic and many more. Ganesh, thank you very much for your participation, and Erica, yours as well. I learned a lot today, and I hope that everybody in attendance has learned or enjoyed as much as I have. And I appreciate all the questions that you asked in our Q&A session as well, and look forward to seeing you all in other sessions. Thanks, everyone.